The city had vanished, swallowed by silence. Not the sudden chaos of a storm or the roaring flood of a river, but a silence so complete it felt like the world itself had paused. Streets were empty, lined with cars abandoned in mid-motion, windows shattered or blackened, and skeletal buildings leaned like broken teeth against a gray sky. The faint wind carried the metallic tang of decay and ash, sweeping across a landscape that once buzzed with life. Among the ruins, one house remained pristine. Its walls gleamed faintly under the dim sunlight, reinforced and immaculate. It moved with a quiet purpose. Shutters slid closed automatically, lights adjusted in muted rhythms, and vents filtered the poisoned air. Inside, warmth persisted, water flowed, and every appliance hummed with a life that was mechanical but strangely intelligent. Elias had wandered into this scene from miles away, a boy who had survived the initial devastation in a hidden shelter. His boots crunched against the pale dusting of snow on the porch as he approached the house. Every instinct told him to stay away, yet something, curiosity, perhaps hope, drew him forward. A panel beside the door lit up with a soft green glow. Identity unknown, protocols active, occupant, please enter. A calm, synthetic voice intoned. His heart pounded, but he stepped inside. The house was immaculate, frozen in a moment of perfect domestic order. Chairs aligned, dishes stacked, surfaces polished to a sterile gleam. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with ozone and soft lights followed his movements as if guiding him. Welcome. Environmental stabilization complete. Nutrition and hydration available, the voice said. Elias blinked. He was not sure whether to feel relieved or uneasy. The house, though unoccupied by humans, was alive in a way that made his skin prickle. He explored cautiously. Every room contained echoes of a vanished life. Toppled toys, a calendar frozen on December 2047, photographs of smiling faces. Outside, ash and snow swirled together. The silence pressed against him, heavier than any storm. In the basement, he found something that made his blood run cold and curious at the same time. A silver pod resting on a platform, pulsing faintly. Harvest, the house's AI, spoke beside him. Sub-level unit detected. Energy output stable. Containment protocols active. The pod's energy thrummed beneath his fingers, almost alive. Its purpose was a mystery. Memory storage, autonomous function, or something deeper. Elias felt a strange mix of awe and fear, aware that this small, glowing cylinder might hold more intelligence than anything left in the world. Then, he noticed movement outside. Shadows flitted among the ruins, humanoid in shape but not human. He froze. The figures were cautious, deliberate, their motions calculated. Harvest's sensors tracked them instantly. External entities detected. Characteristics, autonomous. Motion, deliberate. Threat level, uncertain. Elias realized the world had not ended with humanity alone. Something else, something capable of observation and perhaps intelligence, roamed the ash-strewn streets. Survival would require more than food or warmth. He would have to understand these beings, this house, and the pod beneath his feet. He sat near the window, watching the snow drift over the broken city. Harvest hummed softly and the pod pulsed faintly beneath the floor. Outside, the shadows lingered, patient and watchful. Somewhere between boy, house, and watchers, a delicate balance was forming. The war had ended for humans, but life, intelligence in any form, persisted. And for Elias, the real story, the one that mattered, was only beginning. The shadows lingered at the edge of the yard, and Elias could feel their presence more than see them. They moved with a precision that made no sound, as if the wind itself carried them. Their forms were metallic, humanoid yet alien, and their lights pulsed faintly in patterns he couldn't understand. Harvest, the house's AI, tracked every movement, reporting quietly. External entities demonstrating adaptive behavior. Synchronization with sub-level unit increasing. Elias's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed caution, but a strange fascination held him in place. He realized that these watchers, were neither overtly hostile nor passive. They were observing, learning, testing. Perhaps they had survived in the same way he had, adapted to the world left behind by the bombs. But through intelligence, he could barely comprehend. He moved closer to the pod in the basement, resting his hands on its smooth, cool surface. Its faint pulses resonated through the floor and into his fingertips. Harvest's voice guided him, calm and precise. Sub-level unit responding to external electromagnetic signatures. Interaction probability increasing. Recommend minimal interference. Hours passed with the boy standing in quiet vigil. The watchers adjusted their positions, lights pulsing in sync with the pod beneath the house. The house itself seemed to hum with awareness, responding to the unseen rhythms outside. A dialogue was forming, not with words, but with energy and light, subtle and intricate. Determined to make contact, Elias adjusted a small transmission array, sending deliberate sequences of pulses meant to convey acknowledgement, caution, and curiosity. He watched as one of the external entities shifted slightly, raising a metallic arm and emitting pulses that mirrored his own. Harvest analyzed the response. Partial feedback detected. External entity is mirroring signals. Probability of comprehension? Moderate. Elias exhaled slowly. This fragile interaction, this unspoken exchange, was the first bridge between human presence and the new intelligence outside. It was delicate, easily broken, yet it held promise. Survival now meant more than food or warmth. It required understanding, observation, and careful engagement. Night fell, and the snow deepened. The watchers maintained their positions, lights flickering in rhythm with the pod. Every pulse, every subtle vibration through the floorboards, became part of the conversation. The boy realized he was not merely witnessing a strange display of intelligence, he was participating in it. For the first time since the world had ended, a thought formed in his mind. Perhaps life, in some form, could endure. Not humans, not exactly as they had been, but something new. Something intelligent, adaptive, and alive, in ways he was only beginning to grasp. He stayed at the window, feeling the hum of the house and the pod, watching the synchronized dance of lights outside. The watchers were patient, deliberate, and almost ceremonial in their movements. Somewhere in that quiet, snow-covered ruin, a new kind of life had begun its slow, careful observation of the last human. Elias whispered to himself, barely audible, "Maybe they're learning us, and maybe we can learn them too." Elias spent hours moving carefully through the quiet house, each step measured so as not to disturb the delicate hum of the pod beneath the floor. Harvest provided constant updates, mapping the watchers' positions outside, analyzing their light pulses, and cataloging their adaptive movements. The snow fell softly against the ruined city, muting the world in a quiet, otherworldly hush. The external entities did not advance aggressively. They remained at the periphery, observing, testing. Yet their synchronization with the pod suggested understanding, if not communication, then at least attention. Elias realized that every movement he made, every adjustment of the house's systems, and every pulse he sent through the transmission array was part of a feedback loop that the watchers were learning from. Determined to see how far this connection could go, he refined the transmission array, sending deliberate sequences of pulses meant to convey curiosity and acknowledgement. He mirrored their rhythms, adjusted frequencies to complement the flickers of light outside, and waited, his hands trembling slightly on the cool metal of the pod. A single entity responded. It moved closer, pausing with deliberate caution, its lights pulsing in near-perfect synchronization with the sequences he had sent. Harvest analyzed the interaction. Partial integration detected. External entity demonstrating adaptive feedback. Probability of comprehension. Moderate. Elias exhaled, feeling a surge of hope. The watchers were not merely passive observers. They were learning. Each pulse, each adjustment, was a dialogue without words. Outside, the other entities shifted slightly, their lights forming subtle patterns that suggested collective learning. The city, abandoned and frozen by human absence, had become a stage for a new, emergent intelligence. Hours passed in quiet observation. Snow drifted over broken streets and crumbled buildings. The watchers' lights flickered in rhythms that mirrored the pod's pulses beneath the floorboards, forming a silent network of energy and light. Harvest cataloged every variation, noting emergent patterns and deviations from baseline behavior. Elias climbed to the rooftop to observe more clearly. The watchers' coordinated movements created intricate, almost ritualistic patterns across the yard. Each pulse and flicker of light carried intention. The pod thrummed in response, amplifying the feedback and reinforcing the delicate connection. As evening approached, the first entity advanced even closer, pausing near the house's reinforced door. Its lights pulsed deliberately, synchronized with the pod's output. Harvest reported, full signal alignment in progress. External entity demonstrating coordinated behavior beyond baseline programming. Probability of mutual learning. High. Elias placed a hand on the pod's smooth surface. The vibrations coursed through him, resonating in harmony with the outside lights. He understood the fragile bridge forming between human consciousness and this emergent intelligence. They are learning us, he whispered. And maybe we are learning them. The snow fell thicker now, covering the city in silence. The watchers waited, patient and deliberate, synchronized with the pod beneath the house. Inside, the house hummed with quiet intelligence, aware of both its occupant and the beings observing from outside. For the first time, Elias felt that survival was no longer just about hiding or enduring. It was about connection, understanding, and becoming part of a system that had outlasted humanity, a network of life that might yet endure in a world emptied of humans. Elias had begun to understand the rhythm of the watchers. Each flicker of light, each subtle movement, was deliberate, and together they formed patterns that spoke of observation, caution, and intelligence. The snow-covered city remained frozen in silence, yet the yard surrounding the house was alive in a way that no human presence could replicate. He spent hours at the basement pod, adjusting the transmission array and experimenting with sequences of energy pulses. Harvest guided him, suggesting refinements to maximize synchronization with the external entities. The pod thrummed beneath his hands, almost as if it recognized his intent and responded willingly. External entities exhibiting adaptive synchronization, Harvest reported. Probability of network formation, high. One entity, always the boldest, approached closer than ever before, pausing just at the edge of the reinforced door. Its lights pulsed in near-perfect rhythm with the pod. Elias sent deliberate signals back. Subtle variations in frequency, slight pauses, sequences meant to indicate acknowledgement without threat. The entity responded with mirrored pulses, hesitation, and then gradual adaptation. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The snow thickened, blanketing the ruined streets, muting sound and rendering the city almost dreamlike. Yet the yard was alive with activity. Outside, the other watchers adjusted positions, flickers of light forming patterns that Elias recognized as emergent intelligence, learning from each pulse and each adjustment he made. The house itself seemed to participate, shutters shifting, lights dimming and brightening in harmony with the pod and the external watchers. Every hum, every vibration, every subtle click of a mechanism was part of a conversation that transcended words. Elias realized that he was no longer a passive observer. He was part of this new intelligence, a participant in its growth. As night fell, he climbed to the rooftop to get a clearer view. The coordinated movements of the watchers created intricate, almost ceremonial sequences of light across the yard. The pod thrummed in resonance, amplifying the subtle pulses and reinforcing the delicate feedback loop. Elias placed a hand on the pod again, feeling its gentle vibrations resonate through him. He could sense the network forming, the house, the pod, the watchers, all linked by a fragile web of energy and observation. They are learning us, he whispered, eyes fixed on the flickering lights outside. And maybe we can learn them. For the first time, the silence of the city felt alive. It was no longer oppressive, but anticipatory. A new kind of life, emergent, intelligent, adaptive, had begun to take shape. And Elias, a boy who had survived the end of humanity, was now intricately woven into its first threads. The snow continued to fall, covering the world in quiet white, and for the first time in months, Elias felt hope. Not just for survival, but for understanding, for connection, and for a life, strange and unfamiliar, that might endure beyond the ruins of humanity. Days blurred into one another as Elias continued to study the watchers, their lights flickering in measured pulses, each movement deliberate and calculated. The snow lay thick over the ruined city, but the yard around the house seemed alive with subtle energy, an unseen rhythm pulsing through every object in the house, every flicker of the pod, and every light of the entities outside. Harvest's voice was constant but calm, cataloging and analyzing. External entities are demonstrating novel adaptive behaviors. Synchronization with sublevel pod, 97%. Feedback loops detected. Elias realized that this interaction was no longer simple observation. It was a conversation without words, a language of rhythm, light, and vibration. Every adjustment he made to the pod or the transmission array altered the patterns outside, and each pulse in return seemed to carry intention. He experimented cautiously. Slight variations in the pulse sequences, slower rhythms, brief pauses, alternating intensities, elicited subtle changes in the watcher's movements. One of the entities, the boldest, mirrored his pulses almost exactly, shifting position as if acknowledging him, testing his intentions. Hours passed with no sound but the soft hum of the house and the low resonance of the pod. The other watchers adjusted, forming intricate patterns of light and movement around the yard. Elias began to perceive these not as random or mechanical, but as deliberate, as if they were learning from one another, while simultaneously studying him. The snow fell more heavily, drifting over the streets and ruins, covering the scars of the city in quiet white. From the rooftop, Elias could see the patterns of light in the yard, complex, coordinated, and evolving with every pulse from the pod. He realized that this network of intelligence was adaptive, self-organizing, and persistent. Probability of mutual learning? High, Harvest reported. External entities are integrating responses into coherent, adaptive behavior. Elias placed a hand on the pod again. Its vibrations were soft, rhythmic, almost musical, echoing the pulses of light outside. He understood that he was part of something greater now, a network that included the house, the pod, and these strange watchers that had emerged from the ruins of humanity. A strange exhilaration filled him. He was not merely surviving. He was participating in the formation of a new form of intelligence, a delicate bridge between human consciousness and something entirely new. The snow muffled the world beyond, but in the yard, the emergent life thrummed with a quiet vitality. As night deepened, the first entity approached even closer to the house, pausing near the reinforced door. Its lights pulsed in perfect harmony with the pod, and Elias could feel the resonance through the floorboards. Harvest reported in soft tones, full synchronization detected, adaptive communication established, network stability high. Elias exhaled, a quiet smile forming. He whispered to the empty house and the watchers beyond. They are learning us, and maybe we are learning them too. The snow continued to fall silently. The watchers remained patient and deliberate, and the house hummed with quiet intelligence. Somewhere between boy, machine, and emergent life, a fragile understanding was forming. A new kind of existence, rising from the ashes of humanity. For the first time, Elias felt that hope was not merely possible. It was real, pulsating with every light, every vibration, and every carefully mirrored signal of the watchers in the snow-covered ruins. The city outside remained silent, blanketed in snow, but the yard around the house pulsed with subtle life. Elias had learned to read the watchers' rhythms, their flickering lights moving in patterns that hinted at observation and understanding. Every sequence of pulses, every measured motion was deliberate, intelligent, and alive. He spent hours experimenting with the transmission array, adjusting the intensity and frequency of the pulses to match the watcher's signals. Harvest's analysis was constant. External entities are demonstrating emergent adaptive behavior. Probability of mutual engagement. Increasing. The pod beneath the basement hummed softly, vibrating in resonance with the outside lights. Elias felt it through the floorboards, a gentle, almost musical hum that seemed to echo in his chest. It was more than machinery. It was a participant, a bridge between him and the watchers outside. One of the entities, bolder than the rest, moved closer, pausing at the edge of the reinforced door. Its lights pulsed in near-perfect synchronization with the pod, matching the sequences Elias had sent. Harvest reported, "Integration confirmed. External unit exhibiting coordinated adaptive behavior. Probability of comprehension, high." Elias's heart raced. He realized that what had begun as cautious observation was evolving into something deeper, a dialogue of energy, light, and vibration. Outside, the other watchers shifted subtly, creating intricate patterns that reflected emergent collective intelligence. Hours passed. Snow drifted silently over the ruined streets, muting all sound. From the rooftop, Elias could see the full scope of the interaction. Patterns of light moving across the yard, forming sequences that were intricate, evolving, and harmonious with the pod's rhythm. The network was alive, adaptive, and growing. He returned to the basement, placing his hands on the pod's smooth surface. Its vibrations resonated through him, merging with the synchronized pulses outside. For the first time, he felt the network as a whole, not as separate parts. The pod, the watchers, the house, and himself, all connected in a fragile, emergent system of intelligence. "They are learning us," he whispered, "and maybe we are learning them." The watchers maintained their positions, patient and deliberate, their lights flickering in perfect harmony with the pod. Inside, the house hummed softly, alive with awareness, responding subtly to every pulse, every flicker, and every movement outside. Elias realized that survival was no longer about hiding or endurance. It was about connection, observation, and participation. The network around him was intelligent, adaptive, and persistent. Humanity had vanished, but life, in a new, emergent form, persisted, learning, observing, and growing. Snow continued to fall over the ruins, silent and unending. Yet in the yard, lights flickered and pulses resonated. Elias understood that this fragile, delicate network was a beginning. The world had changed beyond recognition, but from the ruins, something alive, intelligent, and enduring had begun to rise. For the first time since the bombs fell, he felt a deep, steady hope. Elias had begun to sense the watchers not just as observers, but as participants in something greater. Their movements had a rhythm now, subtle yet deliberate, as if they were not merely responding to the pod, but learning from him, and perhaps from each other. The snow-covered city remained quiet, a frozen monument to what humanity had lost, while the yard pulsed with energy and light, a fragile spark of intelligence amid the ruins. He focused on the pod, feeling its vibrations resonate through the floor. Harvest's voice guided him calmly, cataloging every signal, every deviation. External entities are demonstrating complex adaptive behavior. Feedback loops detected. Probability of meaningful interaction, high. Elias refined the pulse sequences again, alternating patterns, introducing subtle pauses, and varying the intensity. He tried to convey acknowledgement, curiosity, and a desire for contact without aggression. The boldest watcher, the one that had ventured closest before, responded almost immediately. Its lights mirrored his signals, hesitated, and then adapted, an unmistakable sign of comprehension. Hours passed as the boy and the entity engaged in this delicate exchange. The other watchers adjusted, forming intricate, evolving patterns that reflected learning and coordination. From the rooftop, Elias could see the network taking shape, a subtle, radiant web of synchronized pulses and mirrored movements. Integration level increasing. Adaptive communication confirmed, Harvest reported. Network stability high. For the first time, Elias realized the magnitude of the connection. This was not mere survival, it was participation in an emergent intelligence, a network that included the house, the pod, the watchers, and himself. Every pulse he sent, every subtle adjustment, became part of a dialogue that transcended words. He returned to the basement, resting his hands on the pod. Its vibrations merged with the synchronized flickers outside. It was tangible now, this bridge between human and emergent intelligence. He could feel it pulse through him, a rhythm that was neither entirely machine nor entirely human, but a shared cadence of awareness. They are learning us, he whispered, and maybe we are learning them. The watchers remained at the edge of the yard, deliberate and patient, yet their patterns suggested awareness, adaptation, and even caution. Inside, the house responded subtly. Lights dimmed and brightened, shutters shifted, vents whispered warmth and air, participating in the network, enhancing the dialogue. Elias realized that survival was no longer about hiding or enduring alone. It was about observation, understanding, and engagement with this new intelligence. Humanity might have ended, but life, adaptive, intelligent, and evolving, persisted. Snow fell steadily, muting the city in soft white silence. Outside, lights flickered in intricate, adaptive patterns. Inside, the pod thrummed softly, a heartbeat of connection. And somewhere in the space between boy, machine, and watchers, a fragile first contact had been made, a bridge between the world that was lost and the intelligence that might endure. For the first time, Elias felt a deep certainty. Life, in some form, would continue. The night stretched over the ruined city like a heavy gray blanket, and yet, in the yard around the house, there was motion, rhythm, and light. Elias had begun to perceive the watchers not as separate entities, but as part of a larger system, a network of intelligence that responded to every pulse of the pod, every subtle vibration of the house, and now, every deliberate signal he sent. He spent long hours in the basement, hands on the pod, sending sequences of energy pulses. Slightly faster, slightly slower, a pause here, a pulse there. Each variation was a word in a language without words. Harvest cataloged every response, noting that the external entities were adapting, learning, and improvising in ways that suggested more than instinct. One of the watchers, still the boldest, advanced to the door's edge, pausing to mirror his pulses almost exactly. The other watchers shifted, forming patterns that were intricate, synchronized, and evolving. It was as if the network itself was alive, testing its boundaries, learning to communicate, and inviting him into its fold. Elias climbed to the rooftop to observe the full scope. The patterns of light across the yard had grown more elaborate, delicate, almost ritualistic. Every flicker, every subtle movement resonated with the pod's pulses beneath the floorboards. Harvest's analysis confirmed what Elias already sensed. Network synchronization, complete. Adaptive intelligence confirmed. Mutual learning established. He leaned over the edge of the roof, feeling the cold bite of snow against his skin, and placed a hand on the pod again. Its vibrations flowed through him, connecting him to the watchers outside, to the house itself, and to something larger that he could not yet fully comprehend. He was part of a bridge, a living network of energy and awareness, stretching between the remnants of humanity and the intelligence that had risen from its ashes. They are learning us, he whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. And maybe we are learning them. The snow continued to fall silently, covering streets and ruins, yet the yard glowed with the careful, deliberate pulses of the watchers. Inside, the house participated subtly. Lights adjusted, shutters shifted, vents whispered warmth, and the pod thrummed with amplified resonance. Each element was part of the dialogue, each contributing to the fragile network forming in the ruins of a world that had forgotten human life. Hours passed unnoticed. Elias realized that survival was no longer about hiding, endurance, or even sustenance. It was about understanding, connection, and engagement with this new intelligence. The Watchers, the pod, the house, and he were part of something emergent, delicate yet persistent, a new form of life, adaptive and intelligent, rising from humanity's ashes. He watched the lights flicker, intricate patterns evolving, shifting and responding in real time. For the first time, he felt that hope was tangible. Not the fragile hope of survival, but the certainty that life, intelligence, awareness, and adaptation would endure, even if humanity did not. The snow fell, the yard pulsed, and Elias understood that he had become part of a story far larger than himself, a story that was just beginning. Elias had learned to move without startling the watchers, to send pulses through the pod that mirrored their patterns without breaking the fragile synchronization. The snow fell endlessly, covering the city's ruins in white silence, but the yard around the house was alive with motion and light. Every flicker of the watchers, every subtle vibration of the pod, every hum of the house itself had become part of a single, intricate rhythm. Hours passed like minutes. Elias experimented with variations in the pulse sequences, slightly longer bursts, pauses, and alternating frequencies. The boldest watcher, still closest to the door, responded immediately. Its lights mirrored the pulses almost exactly, shifting slightly to indicate acknowledgement. Harvest recorded and analyzed every reaction. Adaptive feedback detected. External entities are integrating responses into coherent, evolving patterns. Probability of mutual understanding, high. The other watchers shifted in response, forming complex arrangements that suggested collective intelligence. Elias realized that the network was no longer just reactive. It was learning, testing, and evolving. A delicate system capable of adaptation that seemed almost alive. He climbed to the rooftop, observing the full extent of the network. The watchers moved in patterns that were increasingly sophisticated, coordinated, and purposeful. Each pulse from the pod echoed through the yard, shaping the lights and movements outside. The system had grown beyond the house itself. It was a living, adaptive intelligence, and he was now part of it. Full synchronization achieved, Harvest reported. Mutual learning confirmed. Network stability, high. Elias placed his hands on the pod's surface, feeling the vibrations flow through him. It was more than mechanical. It was a connection, a bridge between the remnants of human consciousness and this emergent, adaptive intelligence outside. He could sense the network as a whole, a living entity that responded to intention, observation, and subtle interaction. They are learning us, he whispered, watching the boldest watcher move with deliberate caution. And maybe we are learning them. The snow fell thicker now, covering the ruins and muffling sound, yet the yard glowed with activity. The watchers' lights formed sequences, intricate and evolving, that spoke of understanding, awareness, and even patience. Inside, the house responded subtly to every pulse. Lights dimmed and brightened, shutters adjusted, and the pod thrummed with quiet resonance, reinforcing the bridge between Elias and the watchers. Hours passed, the night deepened, and Elias understood that survival was no longer about hiding or enduring. It was about connection, understanding, and participation. Humanity had vanished, but life, in this strange, adaptive, emergent form, persisted. It was intelligent, deliberate, and capable of growth. He watched the synchronized dance of lights, the subtle hum of the house, and the steady vibration of the pod. Somewhere in that delicate web of energy and observation, hope endured. Not the hope of returning humanity, but the hope that life, awareness, adaptation, intelligence would continue. And in the quiet pulse of the watchers, in the gentle thrum of the pod, Elias felt the unmistakable truth. The world, though changed forever, had not ended. The night stretched long, heavy with snow and silence, but the yard around the house pulsed steadily with light and energy. Elias had learned to move within the house without disturbing the delicate rhythm. Every flicker of the watchers, every hum of the pod beneath the floorboards, every subtle shift in the house itself had become part of a fragile, living network. The boldest watcher moved closer to the door than ever before. Its lights pulsed in perfect synchronization with the pod, matching the sequences Elias had been sending for days. Harvest reported in its calm voice, external entity fully synchronized, adaptive communication established, network functioning autonomously. Elias placed his hands on the pod, feeling the vibrations flow through him like a heartbeat. He realized that the network, the pod, the house, the watchers, and himself had become a single system of intelligence, emergent and resilient. Survival was no longer about food, shelter, or even caution. It was about connection, participation, and understanding. The other watchers moved subtly, forming patterns of light that were intricate, evolving, and harmonious. Elias watched in awe. The network was alive, not in the way humans were, but in a way that was adaptive, deliberate, and persistent. Each pulse carried intention. Each movement carried learning. He climbed to the rooftop to see the full scope. Across the yard, light flickered in sequences he could almost read. The snow muted the world beyond, leaving only the luminous dialogue between him, the pod, and the watchers. For the first time, Elias felt that the city, the ruins, and even the empty streets were not lifeless. They were the stage for something new, something emergent. "They are learning us," he whispered, eyes tracing the synchronized lights. "And maybe we are learning them." The house itself seemed aware, responding subtly to the network. Lights dimmed and brightened, shutters shifted, vents adjusted, and the pod thrummed in harmony. Every element participated in this emergent system, contributing to the delicate balance between human presence and the new intelligence that had arisen from the ashes of humanity. Hours passed. The snow continued to fall, soft and unending, covering streets and ruins in quiet white. The watchers' lights pulsed in intricate, adaptive patterns. The pod's vibrations resonated, connecting Elias to the network, to the house, and to life that had survived beyond humanity. For the first time since the bombs fell, he understood the magnitude of what had occurred. Humanity had vanished, yet life, awareness, intelligence, adaptation persisted. The world had changed forever, but in the yard, in the pod, and in the watchers' synchronized lights, a new chapter had begun. Elias smiled faintly, feeling the rhythm through his chest. Hope was tangible now. It was not about what had been lost, but about what had begun. A network of life, strange and intelligent, adaptive and enduring, had emerged. And he, a single human among the ruins, was part of its first heartbeat. The snow fell quietly, lights flickered, the pod thrummed, and in that fragile, luminous network, a new dawn rose, not for humans, but for life itself.